Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad that you are able to join us for our discussion on Growth for All, Connecting Strive and Aware to Measure Success. And we will be getting started now, and so glad that you are able to join us. Today, you'll be hearing from our senior product managers, Emily Cram and Shannon James, as they speak to us about these wonderful topics so that you can learn more about how Aware and Strive can interact in dynamic ways for you to really focus on student and teacher growth across your school year. As a reminder, we are recording and you will get a recording sent to you via email as a registered attendee. So those of you that are attending live and those of you that registered and could not join us live will be getting that recording sent to you via email. You'll also be able to locate this through some in-app guidance tomorrow and Friday. So look forward to that the next time you log in. As another reminder, we will be using our Q&A window to monitor any questions from the group. So if you have a question about today's topic, we encourage you to access that Q&A window. Our hosts will be able to answer those either by typing out a response, sharing some help documentation, or even answering your questions live. So I'll help facilitate getting those questions to them if we think it would benefit the entire group to hear a response. We will also be using the chat feature for you to have general discussion amongst the attendees that are present. So we have some opportunities for you to chime in, share with us via the chat, and that will be used for general conversation. So if there's something important to you based on the topic, please use the Q&A for us to address that directly. Our objectives today are listed here. We will be discussing some updates in both Aware and Strive related to milestones in student portfolios, how you can collect student growth percentages in those summative documents, correlation for student growth and teacher performance. Have some exciting things to show you there. We'll also be doing a light dip into running reports for your evaluation process and connecting these topics to the teacher incentive allotment. Here we have a brief agenda of the topics we will be moving through today. So we are going to be, in just a moment, starting that conversation with our Strive analysis, transitioning into some Aware topics with student portfolios, connecting everything through a lens of growth for our students and for our educators. We'll end with some data and reporting and some news and updates. So again, so glad you are here today. I'm going to now turn it over to Shanna to kick us off with Strive analysis. Oh, before we do that, we want to give you a chance to participate in our chat. So we know we are nearing the end of the year, and we want to know what activities are you looking forward to the end of the year. We've got a list of topics to help get you started, but we'd love to hear in the chat, what is something you are looking forward to for the end of the year? So I see star being over, wonderful. Stars kind of listed to be a little sarcastic. We have mixed feelings about what that day feels like. Showing progress on star, graduation day, last day. Ooh, some adult activities to end the year, getting back to self-care or practicing more self-care. Lots of us looking forward to that last day of school where we get to celebrate with our students. So yes, please continue to tell us what you are looking forward to. We love to hear y'all's perspectives, and that helps give us some energy too, to know what it is on y'all's minds as you end the school year. Okay. Now I will actually be turning it over to Shanna to get us started with that conversation on Strive analysis.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I did see a note in there from Kelly that you're looking forward to retirement. So that Kelly's from my old district there. So I'm sure they'll be sad to see you moving on, but congratulations on that. Okay. So Strive analysis. I would like to just take a minute to talk about all that we have implemented over, or actually celebrate all that we've implemented over the last year. As we all know, in order to, figure out where you need to go when you're growing, you've got to know where you are. So you got to be able to find all of those details. So we have spent, if you'll move on to the next, we've spent a lot of time focusing on like how we can get you the answers that you need. You need to know are your appraisers keeping pace? Are they implementing the rubric in the same way? Do you have areas of concern when you're looking at the rubric? Or are there places that you need to focus professional learning? And also, is there alignment between, student and teacher growth? So these are really, really big things that we've been focusing on over the last year. The first tool we released actually the first tool was detailed analysis, but I want to talk a little bit about the document summary. That tool is more, if you want to advance the next slide, this is where you're going to look more at your single document analysis. You're going to have a narrow focus. This is more like a walkthrough where you're going to look at strategies that you might be looking for, common practices among teachers. And this information is really going to give you the meat of those conversations with your coaches. So this is not tied. This is just looking at question analysis. It's not tied to the framework at all. So this will work. This type of evaluation analysis will work in many cases. So the next thing is our more of our detailed analysis. And with this, it is tied to the framework. We released this, I think, almost at the end of the summer. But our goal in this is to be able to give you the ability to check for alignment with your appraisers, look for skew, being able to identify any type of appraiser drift or bias. The next is being able to identify skew within a campus. So if you have specific appraisers that you may want to look at, if there's some, some unbalanced things there, you might want to focus in on that. So that is also something you can do. And then moving on into your dimensions, you're able to kind of dissect the data all the way down to the individual dimensions. You can look at domains, dimensions, you can view, and really you can slice and dice this information in any way to get the information that you need. We really felt it was important. A lot of what we were hearing from districts is we want to be able to zoom in and out of the data to get that information. So by using the filters, you'll be able to find really things that kind of catch your eye and draw into that. So I absolutely love this tool. And I will say I am not a data nerd, but this tool made me a data nerd. So because it's amazing the information that you can find. Then moving on to our next and our latest that we would have released over there. I guess we released this last week. The scatter plot, the correlation analysis. So this is kind of our major, I guess, pièce de résistance, whatever, where we bring student growth and teacher performance together in the same view. And you're able to analyze to see how we're doing. Do we have appraisers that are rating teachers really high and students aren't growing? And that, again, give you the ability to walk down a path to find out reasons why. So that is just kind of a high overview. We are going to get a little bit deeper into the scatter plot later, but so many good things happened with analysis this year in Strive. We're just really excited about all of these tools, which brings me to my next question of looking at these tools. What are you most excited to learn more about, or what do you see being beneficial for you to use in this district? The document summary, detailed analysis, or correlation?
Now, while they're submitting that in the chat, would you mind giving us a little more guidance on who has access to view these types of data analysis that you just shared?
Oh, good question. So your district leaders definitely have access. They'll have access to see all campuses. Your principal and campus leaders will have access to whatever data that they have access to on the campus. So your appraisers should all have access to see all of the analysis options.
Awesome. Thanks so much for providing that clarification for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and passing it off now, Emily's going to share a little bit about some exciting news for student portfolios.
Absolutely. And thank y'all for participating in the chat. I like that y'all are adding everything that you're liking so far. We got a lot of people are liking that correlation tool. It is very neat, a very neat piece. So we wanted y'all to see that today. As we transition into the aware connection here, we're going to talk about student portfolios and what they do, what they are, and how they work in conjunction with Strive is really going to be our focus today. So as we kick it off, I'm going to ask you a question as well, get some more feedback from you. So what comes to mind when you hear student portfolio? Like, what do you think it is? What comes to mind? I gave you some ideas to work with, so you could type A, B, C, or D for work samples. You might just think of TIA for the teacher incentive allotment, a collection of student work, or you may be an other. I have other things that I think about. The reason I ask this is because, yeah, we're already getting it in the chat. There's some A, there's some B, I see a C, I got a D, thank you. We got all of the above. Everybody thinks of something different when they hear the term portfolio, and specifically student portfolio. So we really want to make sure that we answer your question today for what is the AWARE student portfolio, and how can you use it, and what will it do for you? And that may empower you to want to navigate there and start checking it out. So here is really what the AWARE portfolio does. And so it is a collection of evidence of student learning. Specifically in ours, you can grab assessments, you could grab rubric or observation evaluations of the teacher observing the student, and any sort of teacher feedback for what they are seeing based on their working experience with students. So each of these data sets being brought into the portfolio, as you know, is really so you get that bird's eye view. You get a holistic view of what does this kid look like from a year's perspective. Because a lot of times when we're drilling into a data set, that's one piece of data that has different fields tied to it. But at the end of the day, that was performance on one day. So we really want to give you the opportunity to look at student performance over a period of time and say, okay, it has changed over time. What does this mean? And what can I interpret as far as student growth related to it? So that's really what ours is going to do. As we keep going, a lot of times we hear, and this just comes out of us really wanting to get a growth measure, but I compared unit 1 to unit 2, and I determined that the student made growth. And so a lot of times that makes me take a step back and kind of say, oh, let's talk about that a little bit more, because did unit 1 assess the same thing as unit 2? Did it assess the same skills at the exact same level with the exact same depth of knowledge? And if it didn't, then it really probably didn't give you a picture of student growth. Again, it was one sample of work from a student on one day for a set of skills. And so we really like to give you this opportunity to think about a portfolio as a better opportunity to monitor student growth for that reason. Okay, so why do we think that the student portfolios are the most accurate way to determine student growth? And this is kind of just some basic ideas why. I already told you it's a collection of evidence of student learning and kind of what some things could contribute to that collection. But really too, it allows you to grab a select group of students. And sometimes just we are humans, our brain gets bogged down when we're looking at a data set of all of our students. So how can we really select a group that need intervention and view them holistically? Every little piece of data that we can narrow down for our brains helps us to adapt and make decisions better. And so how can we focus this portfolio on just the kids that we really want to work on for certain skill sets and see improvement? And again, at the very end, you also get to determine what is that student growth goal, and did we get there? Did we make it? In addition to all of those notes that you take as well within the portfolio. Okay, so what's the connection piece? And so here it is. Aware and Strive are friends. We're so happy that they're friends and that they work together because they allow these processes to be seamless. A lot of times when I still go out and work with districts, specifically districts that are under TIA, they will tell me, it's a lot of work. I am keeping track of student growth here, here, and here. And I'm cross-referencing that and determining growth. And then I have to go back and put it here, here, and here. And that's a lot of work. And so we don't want you to have to do that much work. So we try to think about you and everything that we add. And so we created these two to be friends so that you're not having to cross-reference as many different places. The portfolio and Strive automatically connect together and communicate. Okay, so let's start with the foundation of a portfolio, and we will work our way into that complete integration and functionality. So I'm starting from, again, the very beginning of the portfolio and kind of giving you some foundational pieces. The portfolio has been around for, I think, around 2 years or more, but we have recently just released enhancements to the portfolio to make it even more dynamic and to give you more compatibility and just more functions while you're observing student work and student learning. So the foundation of it, you would start by creating a portfolio. And again, every teacher has access to create a portfolio. It's under the Analyze tab. You have it automatically there. You don't have to enable it. When you create it, you will first decide what students do I want to monitor, right? And so this screen that you'll see in front of you gives you the ability to see your students organized by class period. It also gives you some of those different qualities associated with a student. So what are their attributes? What groups are they associated with? Could they be at risk? Again, this meets several different areas of need. For TIA, it helps you to identify and make sure that your group is pretty broad. But in realistic everyday practice, it also helps you to see, who are my kids at risk? Am I monitoring those kids at risk? And how am I doing that? And so you can see that from this view. And if you are working with other teams of teachers, you can share out your portfolio with a team. So you have that collaboration aspect as well. Okay, so now let's talk about adding data. After you've selected your students, the natural progression would be to set a goal for those students. Sometimes you do need to look at a little bit more data to get there, but you can add the data to the portfolio. So if you look, we call these milestones within a portfolio. And after clicking on a new milestone, you'll get the option for a rubric or assessment data. So here in this interface, a rubric piece of data is going to really be that observation more so. Like, what did you observe the students doing? And you can rank that within the system and say that they are on different achievement levels. And those are self-determined within the portfolio. Whereas an assessment would be any of those data pieces that you have in Aware that you've given as an assessment. And so we'll talk about the exact types of assessment you can bring in and what data you can show in just a second, but those would be the two major pieces that you can bring in. And then you'll see a little speaking blurb icon, which allows you to make comments next to each one of those, which is huge. I would say that that's one of the most valuable pieces. To see that a student has performed in a certain way only tells you so much, right? But when see what a teacher said and what they put in with the student and what they're seeing, that's huge. That tells a completely different story than a raw score or than an actual performance score, right? And so that actual verbiage from the teacher is really, really valuable, and we get that here. Okay, so what kind of data? What kind of data can you pull into the portfolio? So this was the big enhancement that was made. And you will see that at the top, I have your test types. So you can pull in STAR or EOC. You can pull in any local assessment. So anyone created at the district, the campus level, you can pull those in. Teacher assessments. You can also pull in our local rubric assessment. So not to be confused with, the observation rubric, but our rubric assessment is one that could be created in the system that you're going in and tying the standards and you're monitoring how students are performing on a level. And so that data can be brought in as well. And that's huge contributing data. The map data can be brought in from NWEA, as well as the TELPAS assessment data can be brought in. So those are the major tests that you can bring into the portfolio. Below, these aren't all of the fields, but these are kind of just to give you an idea as we talk through it. You can bring in your raw score, your percent score, the highest performance level achieved. So it will tell you if it was approaches. It won't say approaches meets the masters. It would just say masters if the student achieved that level. You'll also be able to bring in STAR progress and learning standards as well. And so those are just some of the data fields that you can bring in with your test data. All right, and as really the last piece of the major foundation of the portfolio, we'll talk about that connection to Strive. So while you're doing this, as you set a goal associated with your portfolio, it can automatically link and communicate with your Strive student growth goal. It makes sense, right? Those two go hand in hand. And you'll see in the first image there that the portfolio can be brought into that goal. As you start adding those milestones to the portfolio, they'll show up in a snapshot version within Strive so that appraisers, leadership can see those. And at the very bottom, when all of your growth or all of your students have been scored related to their growth, that data will show up as well, and an overview of your student groups that are associated with this portfolio. So very, very transparent in what that looks like and being able to see that connection. Okay, and then last, this was a new ad as well that was just released, is the student portfolio will now be tied to the student profile. And so before, the ownership of the portfolio lived really with the teacher. And we know that that doesn't help the next teacher. That doesn't help other groups of teacher friends. It may not readily help an administrator if you're not tying it to a Strive goal. And so now it will be tied. So where you go search for a student, you have a new tab that says portfolios. And after a student is given their overall growth score, then it becomes a permanent record associated with that student. And so anybody who has roster access to see that student will then be able to see the portfolio. They can double click on it just like you would on the test and scores tab, and you're going to get all of those milestones, and you're going to see the basic scoring and what was contributed to that portfolio for that student specifically. So this is a big win. So now next year, you don't have to walk a form or walk paperwork down to the next grade level teacher. You get to say, hey, it's already on their profile, and you can go look at everything that I documented. So it allows for that transparency. Celebrate good times, right? So we're not starting from scratch as we roll over a school year. No need for that. Okay, so now we're going to roll into some examples. I've given you a lot of information, or I can pause. I'm sorry, I have not checked the channel at all. Tara, do we have questions I need to stop and answer?
We have one that just came in that I need to process. I haven't read through it yet. But as you go through these examples, could you make sure to highlight the use of the standards and how, if a student portfolio is measuring only a select group of TEKs or standards, how that can be incorporated using the ability to add assessment data in a milestone?
Okay, great. And so we will definitely talk about this. This example portfolio shows that, so perfect timing. So this is one that's just kind of a general best practice. You're not necessarily under a TIA lens. Maybe it is just truly organic and you want to monitor some kids and collect some data because you have identified, hey, I have a group of students who are going to need some help, right? We do that pretty quick within the school year. So go ahead and pull them in a portfolio so you can begin that monitoring process. As you do that, you'll see in this one here, maybe you decide, it looks different everywhere. You do an initial skills profile to see where the student is. That's very reasonable in some different classrooms. Others, you may just grab last year's data, and that's a good representation of where they were, you know, aside from the summer, right? So that represents what they showcase at the end of the year. So you could start with that data collection as well. Again, you could include both, why not? And so here we have that being showcased, that a teacher did an initial skills profile of the student to kind of see where they are based on skill sets and made their comments, and then they brought in an assessment. And in this case, this assessment was brought in with a standard associated with it. So you'll see 8.4 at the top, and that standard was assessed on this given assessment point. And this shows you the students and how they did on that skill set. So it is holistic. If this standard was tested, I don't know, 5 times on the assessment, then this is an average of how they did overall. So did they miss 1? Did they miss 2? Did they get them all right? You can see that at a glance. So again, if you're trying to identify a process skill, if you're trying to identify a readiness, a supporting standard, that may be a great piece that you want to grab and say, this is a goal for them to really understand the skill, because they can't move on with the next set of skills until they have this as a foundation. So you can bring in that learning standard. And that could be from a traditional standard assessment, or it could be from a rubric assessment. So depending on preference. Then you'll see as we continue going, there's a middle of the year check-in for the teacher to really say, what are we seeing with students? How are they progressing? And making comments from there. Maybe then after that, you'll see it's a rubric assessment and the raw score was brought in. So how well did they demonstrate skill sets in a rubric form for you overall? And you can use that as an additional measurement to support that middle of year check. And we can continue going with another observation of target skills. And then I just put in the picture in the bottom right corner that you could bring in their final STAR assessment if you so desire, just so you could see what those performance levels look like being brought in for you to view. And then the student growth score on the very right with the different colors of expected, exceeded, and did not grow. So that could be a great way for you to go across the screen and really look at your comments and look at a holistic view of everything you captured for that student and make that decision right there. So we thought that that was just a great way to kind of showcase, it could be very organic in nature, how you pull this type of data in.
Emily, I love that this example that you've just walked us through really celebrates all the different ways that we're working with students in our classrooms and across our campuses. We're not saying this is a single point in time or only 2 points in time. This really is a breadth of what the students can perform, and giving you so many data points to help make that observation and that determination for their growth over the year. So thanks for sharing this example. I'm excited to see the next ones too.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks for honing that in. That is the direction we're going. How can you really see a bird's eye view? So our next example is going to be a TELPAS one. Tara and I worked on this one together. I'm really proud of this one too. So we try to think of a different and unique lens, and I actually love it for TELPAS. And so with this example, you'll see the teacher was focusing on writing proficiency. So we know that there are other elements of speaking and other components associated with TELPAS, but we focused on the writing proficiency piece. So you'll see as an example, we grabbed our TELPAS students. We already knew who they were because they're identified when we look at our student groups and add them. And then we brought in their score from last year and said, what was their overall yearly progress? Did they make as much progress as we were hoping for, or did they not? And then we started making the ability to add rubric being captured in the form of writing samples. So what writing did the student give to you at the beginning of the year, and how are you going to rank that? Of course, we already have how they did last year, and you see that mine has the exact same vernacular as the TELPAS scoring. And I even went in and did the descriptors verbatim based on TELPAS. So it gives you beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. And when you click on the student's name, you can see those descriptors there as well to give you those details for what makes up a beginning versus an intermediate, and you can score appropriately. I love that you can see the growth over time, and you can also see where if maybe a student wasn't making growth, that comment bubble has been filled in, and the teacher took time to fill that sampling in. At the very end of this particular portfolio, it got cut off in this screenshot, but we brought in the TELPAS test for the end of the year so you could actually see how they performed in writing, so that we could cross compare this and say, did they make growth based on our observations and our writing samples from the student? Did they make the expected growth, exceeded growth, or did they not grow? As an overall just process, for me, I naturally went in and made comments for every area that a student did not meet the expected grade level of growth, right? That's what we generally think as a best practice. Did this student grow this year as we intended them to? So any kid who was above that or below that, I went in and made comments and said, here's what happened, here's what we saw, here's what I expected, just so that data piece is there for that rationale. I think it's a great piece that you can add so that there is insight and talk points around that student. Okay, and then our very last example is
awesome. Before we transition to that, I'm seeing maybe some aha moments in our chat that we're seeing that the student portfolio tool that is here and aware is not solely for the SLO or student learning objective process. While it does meet all of those needs, here we're able to highlight alternate uses that can maybe better align to your local practices, give you true alignment across your campus or across your district for everyone to engage in measuring student growth in a similar fashion. So I'm really excited for the final example Emily is going to share. I think it's going to speak to some of the things that are starting to pop up in the chat. So I'll let you take it away again, Emily.
Thank you. And thanks for stopping to reiterate that. I love it. I did see the question as well about this. So we did provide an example of a TIA portfolio. And of course, it's very basic in nature, depending on how your district moves forward with those assessment pieces. But this one is just a beginning of year assessment and an end of year assessment. We have their raw score so that you can see if they did make that growth that you were expecting them to do, and the same abilities to document and make comments within that. Of course, you can use raw score, percent score, or performance level as well here. So it completely fits the need for that pre and post test that we know a lot of districts are taking advantage of under TIA. I did see another question about potential assessments to bring in to the portfolio. And we are always open for your feedback of what assessment would benefit you. We absolutely want to pull in the test types that would help. And so if there's some, please let us know. Email support and put in that feature request and let us know what tests you need. And so we try to capture the ones we hear the most with this project and get those to you pretty readily. All right, so I think we are getting to the tail end of my section. So I want to hear back from you, and you've kind of already done this, so I appreciate y'all. What other ideas came to mind for how you might use the portfolio? Feel free to chat away. You can give me some ideas, or if you're like, I am still processing everything that you just spoke about, that's also very reasonable. But was there anything else that popped into your brain where you're like, this could be great for something we're doing within my school district? And feel free to share that. We love to hear back from you. So any other ideas or what you love about the portfolio?
I imagine people's brains are just like in fast motion right now. There is a lot, and you did a great job, especially speaking to the TIA process. So I love that. I love the updates to the portfolios for sure.
I do see a couple of questions coming in. For STAR data, could you pull just one TEK or two TEKs? Right now, per milestone, it's one TEK, but we love that the feature got added for you to copy a milestone very easily. If you copy a milestone over, it keeps everything that you had, and you can just make an adjustment. So it's very easy. So if you're like, I want to monitor these 3 standards, you can copy it and tweak the standard. We try to really think of those things, and you can move your milestones around if you need to very easily within the portfolio. And you can refresh the data set. If you had a whole bunch of kids that were absent, you could easily refresh it, and all that data is accurate. So all these things we try to think of to make your life a little easier.
Emily, as others are still gathering their thoughts and sharing in the chat, could you speak a little bit to how sharing the portfolio works?
Yes, and so you can share your portfolio with a team. So again, it ties to that teaming aspect that is already in Aware. So when you have a team, y'all can build assessments together, and that correlates with Forethought if you're using that for team planning as well. And so once you have built a team, you can share that portfolio with team members so that they have access to it as well.
And if you share it with a team member that maybe doesn't have those students rostered to them, would the solution be for them to have a monitor list so they could access that student?
Yes, Tara, thank you. I had that in one slide and it seemed a little wordy and I took it out. But yes, you could have a monitor list that you share with your friends, your teacher friends, then they have access to those students and can create their own portfolio and or see the data that is needed for those students as well. Great question.
Yes, and the monitor list would also be a way that administrative staff would have access to build student portfolios. So if you're looking at kind of a programmatic decision with how you might use these updates to student portfolios, anyone with that monitor list could generate this and then share with a team or members of a team that they are associated with.
Exactly. Well, I am loving your feedback. I really appreciate it. Y'all have such positive things to say. We are very excited about this tool and hope your district takes it on, or maybe inorganically you want to adopt it as a new practice. That makes us very happy. I'm going to tag team back with Shanna and let her cover some more of that Stride data and go at a little bit deeper level.
Yeah, and I want to address a question that just came in the chat about Strive and being able to have some coaching purposes for the portfolios and goals and things. And currently that is not, it's not possible, but that is on our radar, that we are definitely investigating how we can bring in some more of those coaching abilities for you to be able to have view goals and portfolios and things like that. So on the radar for sure. Okay, so a little bit more about data and reporting. So one of the biggest things, another push that we made this year was, if we're going to try and bring in and start looking and combining some of the student growth data and the teacher performance data, we need a place to capture that information, right? So we did add the ability in the summative document for you to be able to check a box and say you want to collect that student growth scores in the summative document. So now we have all of that data in one place. You have teacher performance and the student growth scores in one place. So if your district did not have this enabled this year, or if you're not ready, if you haven't been ready or whatever, I would strongly suggest you look at implementing as this coming year. So as you're making updates to your forms, make sure that in the template options is checked to enable the ability to collect that, because a lot of our data and reporting that we move forward on it's important for that to have. These are your templates in Strive. So yeah, your summative template. Okay, so moving on, with that information, we are going to leverage that student growth and teacher performance in the same place. And we have created some tools for you. The first, if you are participating in the teacher incentive allotment, we have created an export for you that matches the data submission that you're actually going to submit to Texas Tech for validation. We added an extra little tweak to it this I guess spring, just recently, to where you can actually include the eligible designations. And so it looks at your teacher performance, and it looks at the student growth. It even looks at the minimum, you have to have a minimum of 3 in domains 2 and 3, and then it does all of that calculation for you, and then it's puts it into a spreadsheet. So if you are definitely participating in TIA, that is something that you want to leverage. And also, side note, we're investigating the ability to include information in other columns that we don't currently have. All right, so the next biggest thing that we are leveraging this information for is the correlation analysis tool. So our scatter plot. And so the biggest reason for this is clearly we want to make sure that our teachers, we're aligned, our teacher performance and student growth is kind of aligned. We want to make sure we're checking that. And also teacher incentive allotment has asking districts to submit this information. We want to know how correlated are your teacher and student growth. So we put automatically, our goal here was to put the correlation coefficient in the top left-hand corner, so you automatically can see that you know what kind of correlation you have. You'll also notice there are filters up at the top, so you can zoom in and out. You can see how your entire rubric, but you could also drill in and see domains 2 and 3. So super excited about this tool. Also, side note, there is a table view of the same information, but we're more excited about the scatter plot. And I would like to take just 1 second to introduce and invite Jeremy Wagner to this conversation. He has actually joined us today as he's a district leader. He currently is in Lubbock Cooper ISD. We have actually had a great, I don't even know how to say it. I'm so excited, but we are bringing him into our team. So he will be joining us very soon as a product manager. And we love his excitement, and he has such a great lens. And so the first time he saw this scatter plot, we were just excited to hear what he had to say. So I would love to give you the floor for a minute just to kind of talk about some things. Walk us through, as a district leader, what you're thinking when you see this.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanna. Just real quick, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Absolutely.
Awesome. So yeah, Shanna's right. When I was first shown this, I had what I would describe as nerd bumps. Within part of my role with Lubbock Cooper ISD, I am heading up our implementation of the teacher incentive allotment. And if you're neck deep in the teacher incentive allotment as a district, these correlation coefficients are a big part of the analysis that Texas Tech University goes through to just determine and make sure that your t-test and student growth data makes sense. And so just as a quick piece of background, when you look at the correlation coefficient, if you're not familiar with that as an analysis tool, a coefficient of exactly 1 means that essentially everything lines up perfectly. And in this particular case, when t-test goes up, student growth also goes up. And that would be a perfect world scenario. And then the negative, or a negative one, would mean as t-test goes up, student growth goes down. And so any kind of negative coefficient would definitely be something you would want to avoid as a district. Whichever, if I remember correctly, there's an example a little later on that kind of explores that. But when you look at these, the coefficient is going to be really impossible to get to really high levels because we're dealing with a muddy kind of topic. And when you have a correlation coefficient that's anything above about a 2.4, 2.5, even into the 0.3s, you're talking about pretty strong correlations when we're talking about t-test versus student growth. But the scatter plot opens up the opportunity for you to analyze and start asking questions about your outliers. And just so from experience within our district, if you look at one particular dot and go, I wonder how that dot got there, I'll draw attention to the one on the far left that has a t-test rating average of about a 4.5, but a 0% student growth. In our district, we had a similar situation crop up. And when we drilled down into that teacher's data, we figured out, yeah, that teacher's t-test was justifiably that high, but she forgot to scan in her student growth. And so it was calculating out at a 0. And so when we were able to identify that through something like the scatter plot that we put together manually, so glad Eduphoria is helping us build these now, we were able to correct that and improve our correlation coefficient. As a similar example, if you go towards the bottom right and you see a pink dot right at about the 90% growth and just a little bit below 1.5 t-test average, we had a similar example also in Lubbock Cooper, where when we drilled down into that teacher's data, we actually started to notice a cluster of dots kind of in that area where there were quite a few first-year teachers in that area. And it came to our attention that a lot of those first-year teachers had their t-tests very early on in the year when they were struggling, still trying to get their feet under themselves. They responded to coaching, academic and instructional coaching throughout the year, and then they started knocking it out of the park and their kids started to grow. But we didn't go back and revisit their t-tests. And so we came to the conclusion, we need to actually conduct another t-test observation on that teacher to improve that correlation. Now, just as a cautionary tale, you are going to have outliers that don't make sense. And in alluding to something back with what Shanna was talking about earlier, when you have outliers, when you see a really high performance on t-test, but a really low student growth, you may have a calibration issue with your t-tests, or you may have an issue with, especially if it's like a district created pre or post test, maybe that pre or post test needs revising, or we need to ask some questions about practice with how that assessment is delivered and what procedures are in place. So this kind of data view just opens up the possibility to really ask some interesting questions and start digging for some very important answers. And I'm really excited about what you can potentially learn just by looking at this and starting to wonder, okay, why is that dot there? And why is that dot over there? And then start having those conversations with some of your appraisers and some of your teachers if necessary.
That is so awesome. I feel like I just need to do a mic drop now because clearly I got a little flustered, but you, again, you frame this information from the lens of a district leader that is just so important. You capture the essence of it, but also, so thank you definitely for that input. You know, you mentioned thinking of, well, why is that dot there and what does that mean? If we go into the next slide, you can see that is our whole purpose in this. We want to show you the data. We want to give you the dots. We want to give you the ability to dig into those data points. So you'll notice you can interact with it. So you hover over the dot. There's a little fly out summary of what you're seeing there. And then in the next slide, you'll see, then if you actually click on that dot, it will pull up a panel on the side. And in that side panel, it'll give you a summary overview of everything. You'll see even the student growth a little further down there. And then from that view, the next thing you can do is you can actually click into and view that evaluation. So while you're analyzing what's going on with this teacher, you can look through, you can read through the notes of the evaluation, the comments, you can compare, a score that was given and validate whether the evidence that was given matches that. And you can identify if there are needs, like, I'm not sure that this would be at a distinguished level. So let's go back and revisit that or whatever. So very, very powerful interaction, very, very powerful tool. The other thing you can do outside of just clicking on those dots is you can use those filters up at the top, just like you can with analysis, to interact with the data that you're seeing. So let's say you want to drill into a specific appraiser. So that teacher, you want to look at that appraiser and see how that appraiser is rating all of the other teachers. You could filter to a subject or grade level. You could, again, filter to a specific domains or dimensions. So we give you a lot of ability here to kind of move in and out of that data, or Ed calls it swimming in the data. So you can get some of those answers and find out if there really is an issue or if it's just a natural part of the process. So I kind of put together in the next slide, the kind of a little overview of just the experience of clicking in and out of it, just the interactivity and seeing how easy it is. I think that this is just a very, very powerful tool. So I'm just super happy to be sharing it and that it's out there, because I think we'll be able to just give a lot of information. All right, so moving on, I do want to call out, in addition, sorry, I was talking, next slide. So we do have some additional cards, we call them insight cards, that are at the bottom of the scatter plot, right underneath the scatter plot. And basically what you see here is this is calling out that scatter plot. It's a different visual, same information, different visual. So the top 5 that are kind of skewed more to the teacher side are going to be in that left insight card. So you're going to see this is where teachers have a very high score, students are lower. In the right-hand card, you'll see, again, the top 5 where you have students with very high scores and teachers with lower scores. So again, it's just another way to call it out, another visual for you to be able to click in and kind of get some more information. And then finally, if you click that view all in the top, it shows you an actual table of that data of all of them. So in the card, it shows top 5. The table will show as many as you have, and it just measures the difference and the skew between the teacher and the student's growth scores. And all of this information is also downloadable. You can actually download this to a spreadsheet. All right, so any questions about this that have come up?
Shanna, we did have one question about printing. So can they print or export this option for visual displays to have conversation with instructional coaches, for example, teachers, so on and so forth? Mm-hmm. So what's printing?
At this point, you can download. We don't have an actual print button as a part of it. You can download everything into a table or a spreadsheet, and print from there. But those are the options that we have right now as far as printing.
Would use of the filters also help you see a date range, so you can see an earlier point in time versus what that data looks like today?
You do have the ability to do a custom date range in the filters, and in our analysis tool. So currently in the correlation tool, because this is the first year we've had this document that has both student growth and t-test, you cannot compare year over time because it's just this year. But like next year, you'll be able to adjust those dates and see previous data and compare the years.
Thank you so much for providing those clarifications for us, Shanna.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we are wrapping up, we would love to hear from you again in the chat. What do you believe is the most authentic way to monitor student growth? So you've had a little bit more reflection, seen some of these connections here. We've got to talk about TIA, about dynamic ways of using the student portfolios for things other than an SLO process, and seeing how all this data comes together in Stride for you to really evaluate the growth of your teachers through what students are doing in the classrooms as well. So we'd love to hear any additional reflections you have, kind of bringing this all together. What are some authentic ways that you are monitoring student growth at your districts? And due to time, we'll go ahead and while y'all are processing, providing those in the chat so we can all learn from one another, we'll go through our closing pieces for today. So news and updates is going to be a little light. This whole presentation has been new information for you all. Many of these things were released in the last couple of weeks, and so you're now getting the opportunity to play with these, see how you would put them into practice to really align with your local policies and expectations. So we're excited to hear from you as you go deeper in using these tools. And we would like to let you have one final opportunity to ask any questions in the Q&A that we can address for you. And then we'd also like to share with you our next webinar will be towards the end of May. So giving you all time to focus on those important assessments that you have with students coming up. And then we would love to engage you in a conversation around accountability with Axiom. So here we have a description of what you can expect during that time. We will be sharing this presentation with you through that email that gets sent out 24 hours after we air. And you'll be able to register for this upcoming webinar on accountability with Axiom. So we hope to see you again at that next topic. Invite others to join that might need to hear this information. So that recording will be going out to you via email tomorrow, about 24 hours after our presentation live that you're here for today. And you'll also have the opportunity to access that recording through some in-app guidance. So tomorrow, when you sign in, take a deep breath, see that announcement pop up, and you can go to our YouTube channel, or you can take a moment to go straight to the recording of this presentation as well. So excited that you were here with us this afternoon to learn, to engage in this wonderful topic on growth, not only for our students, but for our educators as well. We have truly appreciated hearing your feedback and insights with these new tools, and hope to see you again very soon.